bir diğer konuşmacımızı davet etmek istiyoruz. Deloitte Global Sürdürülebilir Finans Lideri davet etmek isterim. May I invite dear Juergen to the stage, please.
Thank you very much. I heard my name, so I think it's my turn now because I didn't understand Turkish. So, yes, hello everyone. It's great for being here. It's really a privilege for me to be in this historic and really fascinating city. And it's a true honor to stand before so many leaders from business, from finance, civil society and government. And to discuss today how climate and nature information can be integrated into the core of financial decision making, which is, of course, a super important topic. Thank you very much, of course, to CDP for their tireless work in driving environmental transparency, and of course for the kind invitation and giving me the opportunity to share my perspective with you today. As a good consultant, I prepared some slides, only 5 or 4, to underline a little bit what I'm telling about. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we heard it already. Besides current crisis, economic concerns, increasing energy costs, tariffs, trading wars, you all know this. I think we must recognize that the environmental challenges we face no longer distant threats. Sometimes I get the impression people are forgetting about this, yes, but actually they are here, and they are here now, already disrupting and reshaping our economies, redefining risk, and yes, demanding at the end a new paradigm for business and for finance. It has rapidly become a fundamental economic imperative and a cornerstone of global competitiveness. And I think we feel it especially in times like this. Yes, just looking what's going on in the world, we feel it's important that we moving forward. Yes, we simply cannot afford to ignore this imperative. The costs of inaction are staggering. Over the last 5 years alone, we have seen over $1 trillion in climate-related global damage. And that's not even including the long-term costs like health consequences and loss of productivity. So the number is increasing and it's getting bigger and bigger. And this figure alone should be a striking wake-up call, to be honest, yes, for governments and for the financial sector. And for business, it's even worse. So the financial burden of a 3-degree scenario could reduce profits about 5 to 25% EBITDA by 2050. And if you look at a healthy EBITDA is about, let's say, 10 to 20, that's really something that we cannot ignore. Yes, the message is simple. Money spent now to cut climate risk more than pays off by avoiding bigger damages and costs later. Keeping warming here to 2 degrees instead of 3 degrees could boost global GDP by about 12 to 25% by the end of the century. So this is really an economic factor. These numbers show a simple truth. Protecting the environment isn't just the right thing to do. It's not any ethical choice or whatever people are saying. It's an economic necessity. Essential for the economy, for financial stability and resilience, and for securing our prosperity. My remarks today will show that environmental reporting isn't about following rules. It helps now make better financial decisions and create a competitive advantage. And I will show how data is changing, where money is invested, how risks are priced, and how companies plan growth. And as we look ahead to COP31, of course, we will have a closer look to the situation of Turkey and how this fits into this global shift. Let me start with a global sustainable finance perspective. For years, sustainability reporting has treated as a compliance exercise. It was about, and maybe it is in a certain way, still ticking boxes. And despite all the perceived backlash we have seen over the last 2 years, we see that there is still a change, and disclosure is changing pretty fast. We are moving well beyond basic transparency and compliance. Disclosure is no longer about just showing what we have done. Now it's much more about proving where we are going and the impact we want to achieve. The future of disclosure will make companies more credible, more attractive for investors, and more visible
market. Clear, high quality, comparable reporting builds trust with investors, and that's super important, of course. My microphone, yeah, here we are again. And most importantly, it attracts capital which is urgently needed for the transition, as financing is one of the core topics and challenges we are facing. Accordingly, disclosure is becoming a strategic enabler for resilience and an integral part of financial decision-making and companies' competitiveness. Companies that embrace comprehensive disclosure gain deeper insights of their risks and their opportunities, fostering innovation, improving operational efficiency, and building a robust strategy for a climate-resilient future. And this is not what I'm wishing for. This is the result of a survey which we recently run together with the German development bank KfW, exactly on the question how decarbonization can support competitiveness and growth. You can, by the way, download this or drop me a message and I'll send it to you. From a global sustainable finance perspective, the integration of climate data into core financial processes is accelerating. And that's why, yes, investors need decision-ready information. Credible, comparable, timely insights that help them assess prices, manage risk and opportunities. And the trend is clear. Better data, better governance, better performance. And probably from a CDP perspective, it's clear since 25 years already, but this is still true. This shift is driving unprecedented growth in green markets. So we are witnessing a massive redirection of capital with a global clean energy investments reaching already 2.2 trillion in 2025. This is, by the way, twice the money that has been invested in fossil fuels. So this is a strong message from my perspective. This message, again, for leaders is clear. Capital is flowing towards sustainable solutions, driven by transparency. In other words, capital allocation, risk pricing, and growth strategies are increasingly shaped by companies' environmental performance. In capital allocation, we can see a clear trend in how money is invested. From institutional funds to private individual shareholders, investors are increasingly demanding reliable, comparable data to inform where they place their capital. And the numbers speak for themselves. 88% of the investors worldwide are interested in sustainable investing. But what means interested? Yes, but half of them are planning to increase their allocations in the coming year. Even in the coming year, I would say, just looking at the crisis which I mentioned at the beginning, I think it's a strong signal that there are still a lot of companies or investors which want to invest into sustainability. And the decision for is largely driven, of course, in the belief that there is a strong return in sustainable investments. And as we all know, investors are mainly interested in return of investment. Yes, so this is a major driver. So there seems to be some reasons why this is interesting. Team frameworks like TCFD, TNFD, ISSB, ESRS are creating, or at least try to create, a common language for sharing information. This helps direct capital to companies that demonstrates resilience and credible transition plans rather than empty promises. So it's super important. And the alignment is further reinforced in advanced mapping between ISSB and EFRAG, as you know. The alignment process is still running, and even we are not fully there. There are still some discussions about double materiality and other topics, and the scope, the application of work already can be reduced or avoided, which is super important just because this is a huge burden for companies. Building on these efforts, the market is ready for a more aligned ecosystem that creates a level playing field and deepen risk understanding and speeds up sustainable change across the markets. As a result of this clearer, more consistent disclosure, green bonds and loans have evolved from a niche market to a central pillar of global capital markets. In 2025, they hit a record of almost 1 trillion in issuance worldwide. This expansion is fueled by investor trust in high-quality, sustainable assets, which, by the way, enjoy a premium of 1 to 3 basis points. In other words, environmental performance can directly lower your cost of capital, which is a big issue as well. Secondly, the way we price risk risk is changing dramatically. The World Economic Forum's risk report consistently highlights, of course, extreme weather, biodiversity loss and resource scarcity as top global risks, but these are not just environmental risks. They are systemic financial risks, and that's exactly what we try to translate. They can disrupt supply chain, lower cost asset values, interrupt operations, and damage reputations, and they're already doing this. Climate and nature dating are becoming critical tools for exactly quantifying these exposures. That's why we need it. Banks and insurers use this information to assess credit risk, price insurance policies, and evaluate long-term investment visibility. Growth strategy. Finally, integrating this data is reshaping growth strategies. We are moving beyond risk mitigation to opportunity capture. Leading firms captured about almost 220 billion in such opportunities only in the last 12 months. Again, a very strong signal that something is moving. And this is not surprising considering the rapid expansion of the green economy. The global green tech market is on track to at least double by 2035. This rapid growth is evident across various segments. Clean energy investments grew by almost 10% annually between 2019 and 2024. And as mentioned earlier, it's roughly about at 2.2 trillion in 2025. Renewable capacity additions such as solar and wind grew more than 30%, and electric vehicle sales jumped about 50% in the same period. So all numbers are going up. There is a market, and a reasonable market and a massive market we need to consider. At the same time, costs have fallen sharply. Yes, solar down by 85%, 55% for wind, again 85% for lithium-ion batteries from 2010 to 2019. So 85% cost reduction in 10 years is really amazing. And this is making these investments, of course, even more attractive, turning environmental action into a clear competitive advantage. And an instrument, by the way, to reduce operational costs. In the survey which I mentioned, 66% of the companies said that the main reason for making climate-related investments is to reduce energy costs. That's a message again, which is not, let's say, driven by just making the world better. It's really an economic aspect. Yeah. In the lead up to COP, I encourage you to move from reporting to acting. Don't just disclose to comply, disclose to compete and to create value. And now let's have a look at Turkey against this global backdrop. And Turkey's progress is really notable. The growing momentum is not just on paper, it's really tangible and evidenced by remarkable achievements in environmental reporting. The latest CDP results, and you will talk about this much more in detail later, demonstrate a strong commitment of transparency and action across the Turkish corporate landscape, highlighted by a record of 45 companies on the 2025 CDP Global A list. And the financial sector in Turkey is also not just participating. With 5 of the world's 23 AAA companies, it is acting as a catalyst for value creation and by incorporating environmental data into their credit and portfolio decisions. And the GDP results are important for several reasons. First, they confirm Turkey's rising credibility in international capital markets. Second, they illustrate how leadership in climate and nature reporting can translate into a competitive advantage in funding and capital allocation. And third, they show that progress in disclosure is not just a niche effort. It's a strategic driver of financial performance and market visibility. In a world, ladies and gentlemen, where investors increasingly demand transparency about climate risk and nature-related impacts, Turkey has now the opportunity to convert this momentum into a lasting advantage, attracting more investments, boosting trade, and gaining greater influence on international policy. COP31 in Antalya is a profound opportunity for Turkey to showcase its progress and to champion critical issues on global stage. Ladies and gentlemen, as we head into COP, corporate commitments are becoming more than just PR. PR, companies are now turning them into formal transition plans and real capital allocation strategies. But let us be honest about the journey ahead. Progress is and remains uneven. We still face significant gaps in data quality, a fractured landscape of standardization across jurisdictions, and crucially, there is still a gap between disclosure and the large-scale financing needed for the transition. COP31 must be more than a political milestone. It needs to send a clear signal to global markets. The question is, will our next chapter be about working in sync, creating a level playing field, and delivering on our plans? I believe the answer can be yes if public and private actors keep working together, and the road to COP is a chance to build that bridge together. But one thing we must always keep in mind, despite substantial efforts and progress and visible successes which we have seen, regulatory complexity and the lack of standardization still weakens investors' confidence and make it hard to mobilize the private capital which is needed. And the challenge is to strike the right balance here. Regulation must be strict enough to drive change and provide decision-useful information, and on the other hand, it must be flexible enough not to block innovation and overburden businesses. This requires ongoing dialogue between policymakers, industry, and environmental experts, and a forward-looking approach to standard setting that leverages technology and tries to align rules across countries wherever possible. And don't get me wrong, balancing complexity with practicality isn't about choosing one over the other. It's about creating smart frameworks that give complete, comparable, and useful information. Our collective success depends on finding exactly this sweet spot. So where do we go from now? One thing is clear, the goal ahead requires still bold leadership, unwavering commitment, and a concerted global effort. Let me share 3 practical priorities for moving forward. First, let's invest in data and skills. As I said, quality still matters. We need better, more granular data. And we need the technical capacity inside companies, banks, and regulators to use this. Yes, and this is not always the case, as we know. This means that making scenario analysis and sector-specific measures part of regular decision-making. Second, drive interoperability of standards. Aligning reporting rules makes reports easier to compare and reduce the reporting burden. So public-private coordination on standard, taxonomy alignment, and assurance will reduce investors' uncertainty and accelerate the capital flows. Third, scale finance for transition. Disclosure must be linked to financing mechanisms like transition funds, blended finance, green bonds, and sustainable linked instruments. This is super important as public-private partnerships are gaining importance everywhere. Governments and multinational institutions and private sector must work together to scale these instruments in a credible way. In closing, wait a second, did I forget one? No, still in here. In closing, I urge every organization, no matter what stage you are at, to step up its commitment to environmental reporting. We did not as a box to tick, but as a strategic must for long-term growth and competitiveness. And above all, collaboration is key. Here in Istanbul, a city that connects East and West, we are reminded that real change happens where ideas, culture, and capital come together. And as we head to COP, let us seize the months ahead of us to join our forces and to team up to shift sustainability from aspiration to action and from action to investment. So thank you very much for your leadership in this journey, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.